Hello everyone, this is Al-Fadi and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of this series on the Qira'at and the controversies surrounding that. We have been covering a lot of grounds in terms of issues related to the so-called Ahruf and Qira'at, myself and Dr. J. Smith, who've done an amazing job, of course, laying out for all of you and all of us, and myself included, an amazing timeline, which is very helpful for you to understand now when we talk about that gap, the 100-year or 200 years gap between the time of Muhammad and things becoming more fixed and developed. And the Qira'at issue is no different. Last time we talked about the so-called 30 Qira'at. Yes, you heard me correctly. 30, you can call them 30 different versions of the Quran. Today's episode going to ask a unique question. Were there even more than 30? And of course, with me here in the studio is Dr. J. Smith. Dr. J, thank you so much, as always, for being here. And this is the question. Were there more than 30?
Well, that's the question I would have never suggested, and I would never have even surmised 2.5 months ago. We didn't know about this. Much of this material has come to light because of Dr. Shadi Nasser. Dr. Shadi Nasser did his doctoral thesis in 2012, where he unpacked much of this material. No one really paid that much attention to it outside of academic circles at Harvard University, where he's at, until this admission by Dr. Yasser Qadi on June 8th. Now suddenly we're all interested in these qira'ats, and we've always assumed there were only those 30. If you go up on Wikipedia or if you go up into Britannica Encyclopedia, you will see the 30 are listed there. Mm-hmm. And we thought, okay, that's the 30. You have the 7 plus the 3, that's 10, and then you have 2 for each one of them, which makes another 20. There's the 30. Right. And assumption is this was all closed at the time of the Mujahideen, and then we found it wasn't closed at the time of Mujahid. There was another 9 that were added by Al-Jazari in 1429 in the 15th century. Now, from what Shadi Nasser is telling us is there was a reason why those 30 had to be picked. And the reason why is that 200-year period from the 8th, 9th, and 10th century, there is a litany of Qur'ans. Mm-hmm. What are we talking about? Well, let's go back and let's go to the slide again. Let's put the slide back up there, and there you can see the Qira'at Conundrum. There you can see Muhammad died in 632. Uthman introduced his Qurayshi Quran in 652. And of course, reminding ourselves of the 10 readings, there are the 10 readings there. The 3 red ones at the bottom, which come later. The 7 early ones at the top, those are the green ones. Those were chosen by Ibn Mujahid, and the ones at the bottom were chosen by Al-Jazari. And then we have followed by the 20 narrators. There are the 20 narrators. Those are the purple ones. And I've circled the 2 most important, Warsh and Hafs, in black. Now, the question is, were there more? Yes, right. There were many, many more. And Shadi Nasser, transmission of the variant readings of the Quran. Let's see what he says. And he says the transmission between the time that the initial 8th century reader, Ibn Ahmed, we talked about him yesterday from Damascus, he was the first one, in 736, created his Qira'at Quran, and the 10th century, when the original 7 readers were appointed by Ibn Mujahid, we have an intervening 200 years, 736 to 936. In those 200 years, there were many other transmitters known as rawis, or students, or narrators, or transmitters, whatever word you want to give to that word.
Right, and obviously there's a reason why he's saying students or narrators, because not all of them were really living at the same time with the reader himself. So if they were with them, maybe they were a student, but some of them came later and narrated that.
Some of them came later, some of them, you're right. Yeah. And so they were what I would like to say is they were in the same family or in the same stable.
Sure, I mean family of manuscripts maybe, family of readings.
Well, yeah. Even that is a misnomer, because if they were in the same family, they should be exactly the same.
That's true. That's true. There you go.
That we're going to show is not the case.
Exactly,
but let's go back.
Exactly.
He says, in fact, there were so many that this became a crisis, forcing Ibn Mujahid to appoint just 2 transmitters for each of the 7 canonical readers. Let's review that. There you can see the review that we've just talked about. So there they are. Al-Jazari and Ibn Mujahid, between the 2 of them, we now have 30. But we find that there were other scholars beside Ibn Mujahid who chose the rawis from the initial 7 readers. What are we talking about? Well, let's go to Al-Dani. Al-Dani, he died in 1053. So you're talking about 100 years after Ibn Mujahid. You have this fellow who has a number of rawis. Take a look at this.
And by the way, I want to mention to people, Al-Dani is a great deal when it comes to recording the different Mus'haf or Qurans.
Okay, in what way?
He was talking about these kind of issues. You know, they were different. He called them masahif, meaning Qurans, plural.
Okay,
that were
Musahaf
different.
means manuscript, really, as well.
Yeah, Mus'haf, codex, you know,
Codex
if you
is
wish.
what we would call a physical codex. This is not a recitation now.
Right.
Okay.
And the only problem with that is, as you notice, he's 11th century, and yet there is a lot of scholars sometimes rely more on his work when, in fact, the guy was a late, basically edition versus early ones.
Okay. He would have agreed with the first 10, just like Mujahid.
Yeah.
What does he do with the rawis? Take a look at this.
Yeah.
So, for Nafi, you have 4 rawis. For Ibn Kathir, 3 rawis. For Abu Amr, 2 rawis. For Ibn Amir, 5 rawis. For Asim, 4 rawis. For Hamza, 1 rawi. For Al-Kisa'i, 5 rawis. That's a total of 24 rawis, narrators or transmitters. That's 10 more than Mujahid. So there is not an agreement here. Why haven't we heard this before?
So now we have 40.
Now we have 40
Right.
on top of that. Now he's still not the only one. There's another one. Now we find that there is this guy here. Let's bring him up, another scholar, and his name is Abu Ali al-Maliki. Now he is died in 1046.
So another 11th century.
11th century, about 100 years after Ibn Mujahid. Yeah. He has a completely different list of rawis. Let's look at it. For Nafi, he has 4 rawis. Ibn Kathir, 2 rawis. Abu Amr, 3 rawis. For Ibn Amir, 2 rawis. For Asim, 2 rawis. Hamza, 4 rawis. Al-Kisa'i, 8 rawis. That's a total of 25 rawis, narrators or transmitters. That's 11 more than Ibn Mujahid. So one has 10 more, the other one has 11 more.
Do you know, because I don't want to make any assumptions right now, do you know of any of his rawis overlap with
Some of them do overlap, so we have to be careful. These are not in addition to.
Okay.
But hold on a minute. That may be the case. I just want to show you that the lists were not, Ibn Mujahid is not the only one. He was the one that was sanctioned, became the canonical.
Of the 10 of the 7 readers, I should say.
He was the one that added another. He was the one that added another 14. Al-Jazari is not even in the picture yet. Al-Jazari he doesn't come till 1400s. So don't even put him into this picture. So the other 3 plus the other 6 have yet to come into this picture.
Right, but what I'm saying is Ibn Mujahid canonized the 7 readers plus 2 narrators.
Rawis for
so
each one of those.
That's the 14 that you're talking
14,
about.
So we're talking about 20.
Right.
We're talking about 21.
Correct.
So these guys have another list. Beyond that 21, they have other lists of others. But just to let people know, so there is a lot of discontinuity, there's a lot of miscommunication here, and that's why you can understand why then Ibn Mujahid had to be the one that was chosen. You can then understand why in the 11th century they then raised his canonical 21 to almost divine status. It was because in contradistinction, they had to have one that was the best of the best, the creme de la creme, that Yasir Qadhi is always talking about.
So, Dr. J, I think there is one theme we keep seeing popping up over and over again. Regardless of who tries their best to fix the issue, like Uthman, something pops up a century or 2 later. Ibn Mujahid tried his best to canonize. Still, a century later, we still have problems.
Okay, and when he tried to do something, and give him credit. He wanted to try to, because there was all kinds of chaos. There was chaos as to what with all these different guys, and everybody was claiming to be the best of the best. He had to then put his thumbprint down and said, no, these are the 7, and then these are the 14.
Even though he didn't consider them to be divinely inspired.
Not at all. In fact, he would never have said that these are from Muhammad even.
There you go.
But a century later, when you have all these other lists coming up, the others have said, we've got to decide who are the canonical ones, and that's why they elevated Ibn Mujahid's list, and that's why they gave his list a divine status.
And you wonder why we say it's a man-made.
It's all man-made. This is all man-manipulated. This is all man-injuncted, and that's why when Muslims are making the claims they're making today, they don't know this history. They need to go back to this history. So let's go back then to how they chose their canonical rawis, what you're asking for. Now, usually they did this by the largest number of students who came after them, which means whoever was the most popular. Is that the way you do textual criticism?
No. In textual criticism, of course, there are a number of criteria. I'm going to just share a few. You look at the family of manuscripts, like you said, right? That's the amount or the weight of the manuscript is important. You look sometimes at the phrases. Shorter, more complex sayings or phrases are considered to be original more so than the easier ones to read.
Right now, I hope everybody's listening. So you're looking at the text.
Exactly.
Textual criticism, by definition, should involve the text.
Exactly.
So you're looking at the text, you're reading the text, you're comparing the text, you're discerning from the written text that's in front of you certain criteria.
That's
and the
correct.
criteria is, does it match to that which is the earliest?
Exactly.
You always go back to that which is the earliest. If you have the original, better. But if you don't have the original, you go to that which is closest to the original, by definition. So this is not happening here at all. There is no reference anywhere that I can see of anybody looking at the text and even comparing whether or not these rawis, whether or not they correspond with the readers that they're attributed to.
That's true. And I want to add even another wrench into this whole debacle right now. I mean, it was okay to keep going back to Uthman's time, but now we have something called the Sana manuscripts and something similar to it, which means the gap between the time of Muhammad and the time when Uthman did what he supposedly did, we have readings that are different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do we do with that?
Okay, that's yet to come. That's material that we're going to be introducing in another a month or so. Let's go back to these rawis. These rawis, in biblical textual criticism, we've always used the textual analysis of looking at the text, seeing if it corresponds, see if there are derivations or there are things go off in a tangents. If they are, we throw them out. If in doubt, throw them out. Now, where do you think that phrase came from? Came from the whole context of how you put together the biblical text. Now, that has not been done with the Quran, and it's certainly not been done here. What was done here was who is the most popular. You want to get the most popular. What does that mean? Well, you want to look at how many students they had or how many people that came after, how many strands. And you keep on hearing about in their writings. And Nasser brings this up. Shadi Nasser, all the different strands. You look at whoever has the most strands, he's the one that is chosen. If you only have a single strand, you throw them out because he's not popular. But what does it mean, strand? It doesn't mean whether or not their text was the same. It has nothing to do with what their texts would correspond with each other. It was who was the most popular, who had the most students, who had the most followers.
Now, was politics and honor and family name involved in here?
Absolutely, it was. It really came down to who had the most prestige, who people went after. Now, question I went. How do we know if any of these rawis between the 8th and 10th century had anything comparable to the readers they are associated with? Has anybody done that work yet? And I'm asking Muslims, do you know of anybody that's done that kind of work? Looking and seeing whether you have any of these, and I've got them right here, any of these guys here, Warsh and Qalun, did they match what Nafi said? Has anybody looked to see whether Qunbul or Bazi matches what Ibn Kathir, who is the reader for them? Has any from Al-Susi or Duri match what Abu Amr and Khadij Judan? Any of these rawis, do they match? Is the Hafs that we use today, is his the same as Asim? We're going to get into that. I mean, that's yet to come.
I don't want to also throw another wrench into it, but you and I know that there's at least 7 different Hafs traditions.
Exactly.
There you go.
Hatun has been able to collect all 7 of them, and we're going to show a picture of that. But that's for another episode. We're going to come to that in time. Now, let's look at Warsh, because if they're the most popular, you would have thought that Warsh would be on this line. So what we're finding, and let's look at Warsh, because Warsh, this guy right here, let's get the right one. Here is Warsh. Let's put it right side up. Okay? Warsh there. This guy who writes or dies in 812, so he's the 9th century. His is very popular all over North Africa. But he is in the family of Nafi, who comes from Medina. So is Warsh from Medina? No, he's not.
Of course not. Yeah.
Do you know where Warsh is from?
I can't recall now. Was he Kufa?
Egypt.
Oh, Egypt.
He is Egypt. He's not from Basra. He's not from Kufa. He's not from Damascus. He is Egypt. So if he is in Egypt, then what is he doing in Nafi's family? Because in Nafi's family, There are two others that are much more authoritative. One is called Ismail ibn Jafar, and the other one is called Al-Musayyabi, who have many more lines after them, much more popular. They, along with Qalun, are the three major rawis that come in the line of Nafi. They are all from Medina. So what in the world is Warsh doing there?
So the guys in Medina who were, at least you can say, at the epic center of when the Quran came from, technically, Mecca and Medina, were not selected as popular as Warsh, who was in North Africa.
Exactly. And why was Warsh selected when he only has a few strands that come after him, was not very popular, did not agree with Nafi in his recitation or in his Quranic text? The reason he was chosen is because of the fact that they needed somebody from Egypt. That was the only reason. So this had nothing to do with popularity. It had everything to do with geography. Also, remember Al-Dani that you mentioned earlier? Al-Dani went and studied under one of the students of Warsh, and so he put him, Warsh in his list. So that's why then they went to go ahead and they gave Warsh his accolades and put him as one of the two rawis that belonged to Nafi. And they threw out Ismail ibn Jafar and Al-Musayyabi. Fascinating. So it has nothing, again, to do with textual credence or credibility or authority. It has nothing to do with whether or not they even match each other. It had everything to do with either popularity or it had to do with geography, which in this case was for political reasons.
So let me draw an attention to something. Our Muslim friends always attack Luke and they say, oh, wait a minute. Luke wasn't really in contact with Jesus. Well, of course, we don't know. I mean, that's an assumption. But they have a problem with Luke, who was in Jerusalem also. He was with the Apostle Paul. He was with other apostles. He had collected from eyewitnesses. They have a problem with that. But they don't have a problem with Warsh, who had nothing to do with anything and was only in a certain area far away, just to make sure that we covered our geographical regions with readers.
And I love this, you're doing this as an example, because when you look at the anecdotal evidence, what we do now know about Luke is that he is probably the most authentic because of the fact he would always name places, dates, and events. He used more historical data than any other of the writers, because that was what he was interested in. That's why he has given us probably more authority and a credence for the right man at the right place doing the right thing at the right time, which is what you need for historical criticism. And that's why Luke in the book of Acts and also in the Gospel of Luke is by far the most credible, giving and showing that you have to have these writings in the first century and no other time. And so when you do the same thing with Warsh, nothing of this is even asked. No one asks these type of questions. Is he writing the right thing? Does he have the right material? Is he having the right text? Does he have the right dates, names, and places? No historical application has ever been given to Warsh, and yet Warsh is the second of all of the qira'ats that are used today, the second most popular.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
all in North Africa. Why? Because he's from North Africa. He's from Egypt.
Right.
Good man. So let's continue on. So these are the intermediate rawis. How many of these intermediate rawis were there?
Do you want to show the slide, by the way?
Let's go back to the slide now, and let's go back. And here's the question. Let's see what Nasser shows us. And when you go back to Nasser, I'm going to show you a number of graphs here, because when you look at these graphs, this is something that comes from his own research. Let's look at the first one, and let's look at Ibn Kathir. So here's Ibn Kathir. He is from Mecca. He died in 738. Ibn Mujahid died in 936. So you're talking almost exactly, we're talking almost exactly 200 years later.
And this came from Dr. Nasser's book,
Nasser's
by the way.
book. This is from his, these are his graphs.
And folks, I tell you, he did an amazing work. So I encourage you to go and get his book.
Okay, I've got circled there Ibn Kathir. That's circled Ibn Kathir. Let's go ahead and circle also Ibn Mujahid. I want to look at those two circles because what's in between those two circles are a bunch of names. See all those names and see all the threads? Those are the threads we're talking about. So what are the most extensive threads? Look at the two ones in red, and I'll just
Ibn Kathir is the reader, not Ibn Kathir, the commentator.
No, this is another. Yes. Be careful. We're not talking about the Ibn Kathir who is from the Tafsir. This is Ibn Kathir who is the reader from 738. There is Al-Bazi and there is Kunbul that I've circled in red.
Correct.
Those are the two that Ibn Mujahid chose. Just those two. Out of how many? Out of 59 different rawis, Qira'at rawis. That means 59 different writers of the Quran. That means all of which would have been written down at that time. Between the 8th and 10th century, 59 different transmitters wrote 59 different derivations of the Quran, all in the family of Ibn Kathir, and only 2 were chosen out of these 59. He threw the other 57 away. Now, did you know this before today?
Before reading his book and going through this, of course not. There's a lot of these things that you grow up in a Muslim country and you're not taught any of this, by the way. You're told, okay, yeah, sure, there is warsh, there is hafs, but this is what the Prophet basically read.
Okay, that's Ibn Kathir. That's just one of the 10. Let's go now to Nafi, the one we've just been talking about from from Medina. There you have Nafi, and he dies in 785, and let's circle his name up there, and there's Ibn Majah at the bottom. So how many, who is it the one that he chooses? Well, he chooses Qalun, who is from Medina, and Ibn Majah chooses Warsh, who is from Egypt. But he should have chosen Ismail or Musayabi, who are over to the left. What's fascinating, how many did he have to choose from? Well, he had 63 different Qira'at Rawis.
I mean, you have Yaqub ibn Ja'far. He's connected to Nafi', connected to Medina. I mean, at least he has more sources than Warsh himself.
Look at Ismail ibn Ja'far to the left. I maybe should have circled them, but you can see Masayabi, who are to the left of Warsh. Those are the ones they should have chosen, much more popular, better known. They were dismantled, and Warsh was chosen in their place because he was from another city. But look at the 63. I'm like really need to focus on exactly how many we're talking about. So let's go to another one. Here is Abu Amr from Basra. 770 when he dies. So let's go ahead and circle him. Ibn Mujahid down here at the bottom again. Let's see how many he has. Well, before we look at that, he chose Al-Duri, which is there circled in red, and also Al-Susi. Those are the two he chooses, and because, again, they have many more strands. They're more popular. This has nothing to do with ability. This has nothing to do with textual credibility. It has everything to do with political situation as to who is the ones that has the most after him. How many does he have that he could have chosen? 65. 65 different Qurans that he could have chosen. He threw out 63 and only chose these two. This is starting to add up, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Let's go one more. I just want to give you one more. And this is Asim from Kufa. He dies in 745. There's Asim's name circled and Ibn Mujahid down at the bottom. Take a look at all those names. Every one of those names. They're so small, I can't read them. Because to get them all in one graph, there's so many of them. Who are the ones that he chooses? Well, he chooses Shuba and he chooses Hafs. Those are the two that are circled in red. So how many could he have chosen from? 91. 91 different Qira'at Rawis, different Qurans. Each one of them would have been a different Quran. He chose only Shuba and Hafs. Now, let's go and take a look at our conclusions here. First of all, the Qira'ats between Ibn Kathir and Ibn Mujahid are 59. The Qira'ats between Nafi and Ibn Mujahid are 63. The Qira'ats between Abu Amr and Ibn Mujahid are 65. The Qira'ats between Asim and Ibn Mujahid are 91. That's a total of 278 different Qira'ats. Basically, you're talking about 278 different Qurans just from those four. But remember, we have 10 of them. These are just 4 out of 10. So if you take the average of the 278 is 70, and you multiply that times 10, you're talking about almost 700 different written Qira'at Qurans that we could have had today. Except for 670 of them were thrown out and only retained the 30 that we have today. Now, I never heard this until this year. I wasn't even aware of this. I've heard of Shadi Nasr. I hadn't read it, but it was Colin who got me onto this. He said, Jay, you need to read this stuff. So that's why I'm sharing this with you. This is nothing that I've come across, and I've never heard Muslims talk about this. Why don't Muslims talk about this? Why aren't Muslims making this public? Why aren't Muslims telling people like Muhammad Hijab, you've got a real problem here. If you think 30 is bad, what about 700? So when he put his hand out there to Yasir Qadhi and said, which one are you going to put there? There could be a possibility of 700 that he could put there. And when Yasir Qadhi says, well, they're all of them. All 700? Just by looking at 23 of the 700, we've come up with 93,000 differences. Can you imagine the number of differences we could come up with if we had access to all the 700? Goodness sakes, I'm so glad I don't have to defend this. No wonder we're talking about holes in narratives. This is a huge hole, a hole that's 700 times multiplied. And that's why, can you then understand why Yasir Qadhi says, we do not talk about this in public. Take my class. And I would like to know if even Yasir Qadhi is aware of this. Is he aware of these 700? Did he know?
I'll be surprised if Yasser Qadi doesn't know about the work of Shadi Nasser, but who knows? Maybe he is.
Thank God we don't have this problem with the Bible. Thank God we don't make these claims. Thank God we don't say that there has only been one Bible that was sent down exactly as we have today to Jesus Christ, and he wrote it down. No, or he had it written down. No, we don't make these type of claims. But see, the Muslims do. And that's when you hear Yasser Qadi get up, say there has not been one word, not one letter, that there's only been one Quran. We know it's preserved. When he goes into his mantra, he's sitting there and he's just saying, I do not want to be confused with the facts. But we're looking at him and he's an emperor with no clothes. This is the emperor with no clothes. Folks, we're exposing them. They don't have anything. They're not wearing a thing. They are actually exposing themselves because they're not looking at the historical record.
That is correct. And folks, this type of info, Jay is not kidding. This is groundbreaking for the vast majority of people in the Muslim world, but even for everybody in the world. I assure you that not a whole lot of people spend time or invest energy to know about these things. And here we are, putting it to you in a very simplified fashion, in a way that makes perfect sense. So use it with your Muslim friends. And if you're a Muslim watching this, challenge your leaders who keep telling you you have the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet of Islam. Which Quran? Which Quran? The one Quran, 10 Qurans, 70 Qurans, 30 Qurans, 700 Qurans? Which Quran? Please tell me which one out of all of these came from heaven. That's the main question. Jay, what are we going to cover next time?
We're going to start, because one of the claims that has come up over and over again is that these don't change any meaning, these don't change any doctrine, this is nothing really important, they're just pronunciation differences, they're different dialectical, they're different recitational differences. This is what Dr. Shabir Ali always goes on and on and on and says. There's no difference in meaning or doctrine or practice or belief. We're going to look at some of these. We're not going to look at a lot because listen, there's 93,000 of them. There's no time to go through all 93,000. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, these do change the meaning. And in some cases, even the practice.
The 93,000 were out of how many so far?
Out of just 23 so far.
23 out of the 37?
Out of the 30 that are official.
Or 30, right.
37 that she has, you're right. But we just haven't had time. And this is what I'd love to say. Why aren't Muslims doing this? Why do we have to do it?
Well, that's classic, by the way. Always the Orientalists in their mind do the work for them, and they only pick the ones that prove the Quran to be okay.
Or support their agenda, or support their narrative.
That's right. Very good. Well, thank you so much for amazing work, you and your team. And I'm really blessed to be among maybe the first to share these kind of information with our people. Thank you so much for being here with us. And until we meet you next time, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International. Also, click on the bell so that you can receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or we go live. And I would like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking on the link right below, and that way you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you on how you can give to our channel. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.